Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are the shortcut to being well-informed, tackling complex subjects, and extracting the surprising facts you need to know.
Today, we're diving deep into a creature that really dominates North American folklore, Bigfoot.
Or Sasquatch, that massive, hairy, perpetually elusive figure of the wilderness.
Yeah, and it's so much more than just folklore, isn't it? It's a full-blown cultural phenomenon.
It really is. I mean, we're talking about something that's generated, what, over 10,000 reported sightings in the continental U.S. alone?
At least, it's a fixture in movies, books, and it's become a huge part of regional identity, especially up in the Pacific Northwest.
The lore is fantastic, but our mission today is to cut through all that myth using some cold, hard science.
Exactly. We are performing a deep analysis of the skeptical argument, particularly the one put forth by scientific analyst Justin Lake.
And his central premise is actually pretty simple. He argues that given the sheer amount of time, the intensity of the search, and, the sophistication of modern science,
The burden of proof required for a creature like Bigfoot has just demonstrably not been met.
that's the core paradox we're tackling. I mean, if this is a massive, long-lived primate species capable of reproducing and maintaining a stable population in North America,
Then why does modern science, armed with satellite imaging, advanced DNA sequencing, global communication, everything, why does it remain utterly unable to confirm its most basic biological existence?
Lake uses this fantastic analogy to summarize the skepticism, and it just sets the tone so perfectly.
What's that?
He says the entire situation has the same vibe as someone insisting their imaginary friend just stepped out for a smoke every single time you ask to meet them.
That's perfect.
It is, right. It perfectly captures that constant deflection. The evidence is always just around the corner, or the creature is just too clever or too remote.
But when you actually apply ecological and biological realities, what a huge mammal must leave behind. That scientific silence, as you said, becomes absolutely deafening.
Okay, so let's start there. With the core of Lake's critique, the ecological and biological case against Bigfoot.
Right. The foundation of his analysis is what he calls the zero biological evidence problem.
And this isn't just about, how hard it is to get a picture.
Not at all. This is about the unavoidable mandates of biology. Every single animal, from the deepest sea fish to the most elusive forest cat, leaves traces of its existence. We expect hair, bones, shed teeth.
Scat, roadkill, reliable territorial marks, things you can actually test.
Exactly. And the problem isn't the absence of a sample. It's the absence of any scientifically verifiable, repeatable, and authenticated sample over decades.
After 30-plus years of intense searching by both professional scientists and, very dedicated enthusiasts, that silence is, well, it's a profound scientific failure.
Think about the volume we're talking about here. We aren't looking for a mouse. We're looking for a creature allegedly the size of a very large gorilla, maybe weighing between 600 and 900 pounds.
So when a creature that size eats, it must generate waste on a monumental scale.
Monumental. And Lake focuses on what he calls the scat shortage, because feces are nature's most informative calling card.
Right. They contain diet information, health metrics, and the big one, DNA.
The holy grail.
So let's just break down the implications of this scat shortage. An 8-foot-tall animal eating thousands of calories a day cannot politely hide all its piles of scat the size of personal pan pizzas, as Lake puts it, for 30 years. Why is that expectation so high?
It's about density and population. A creature that large, especially a primate, has to defecate frequently. And it's not just one creature either.
Of course. For it to be a species, there has to be a population.
If we assume a minimum viable breeding population, let's be conservative and say a few hundred individuals to maintain genetic diversity, that means we should have literally thousands of pounds of fresh, large primate feces dropped across the environment every single year.
So if they're in the temperate forests of Washington or Oregon, hikers, hunters, biologists, someone should be finding it constantly.
We should be tripping over it, and yet we have nothing. Not a single sample that has ever been authenticated as non-human primate scat in North America. Zero.
And that failure leads us directly to the next ecological implausibility, the need for that stable breeding population.
Yes.
Does the environment of the North American temperate forest even suggest it could support a population of these animals large enough to avoid inbreeding and eventually extinction?
Well, the cultural anthropologist Philip Stevens did research that aligns perfectly with Lake's critique here. For any long-lived, large mammal species to survive, it needs a substantial minimum breeding population.
Spread out across a huge area, right? So they have enough resources.
A vast area, yes. If the population is too small, genetic bottlenecks, inbreeding, and eventually extinction are just. They're guaranteed. It's a biological certainty.
So what makes the alleged habitat, temperate latitudes like the Pacific Northwest, so implausible compared to where we know other apes live?
Well, think about it. Every known non-human ape on Earth, gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, every single one is found exclusively in the tropics of Africa and Asia.
Because they rely on that year-round consistency of resources.
Exactly. Establishing a large, reproducing, calorie-hungry primate population in a highly seasonal temperate climate where food availability just plummets in winter presents ecological hurdles that are completely unprecedented and unproven.
The logistics of survival for a cold-weather giant primate are just staggering.
They're staggering. And if a substantial number of these large mammals were constantly stomping around, to use Lake's phrase,
And what should we be seeing everywhere?
ubiquitous evidence of large-scale activity. This isn't just about a few blurry tracks in the mud.
No.
We would expect to find maintained foraging trails. We'd see tree markings consistent with territorial defense. And given their size, there would be substantial wear and tear on the immediate environment.
And roadkill. I mean, even if it's rare, it has to happen eventually.
It has to. Yet we have none of the converging lines of evidence required to move this from folklore to biological fact.
Okay, so we have to address the last-ditch excuse that you always hear from enthusiasts to explain the lack of skeletons.
Oh, yes, the they bury their dead argument.
It's the ultimate cleanup crew defense. It guarantees a pristine forest floor.
It's a very compelling narrative, but it just falls apart under any kind of scrutiny.
So let's fact-check this. Are there any known non-human primates, even the really smart ones, that show ritualistic burial behavior?
The answer is a resounding no, not a single one. Chimpanzees might briefly mourn or guard a body, but they do not use tools or their hands to dig a grave and inter the remains.
That level of ritual is unique to Homo sapiens.
It is, and even if, and this is a huge if, even if we granted them this highly unlikely behavior.
You still have the problem of nature just being messy.
Precisely. Entropy. Even if 90% of deaths were successfully buried, you still have unavoidable accidental deaths. Animals fall down ravines, they die in rivers where the body is carried away, they get killed by predators before the cleanup crew can arrive.
Or they just die midwinter under 10 feet of snow.
Exactly. Lake's point holds true. Perfect cleanup crews aren't real. Scavengers would find them. Forensic anthropologists should find them. And the fossil record over thousands of years should have produced remains by now.
Just like we find remains of the extinct giant ape Gigantopithecus blacki in Asia or Neanderthals in Europe.
Yes. The complete absence of great ape remains, fossil or otherwise, in the Americas is a significant, gaping scientific void.
Okay, let's deepen this ecological dive and focus on metabolism. If Lake is correct that this creature can exist quietly, it's because of what he calls the caloric catastrophe.
Right.
How demanding is a 600 to 900-pound primate?
The metabolic demands they're astronomical. And relentless. We're talking about needing thousands of calories daily, not seasonally, but year-round.
This isn't just a matter of grazing on berries.
No. This requires constant calorie-dense intake. The environmental capacity of a temperate forest, especially during the lean months of winter, is just not suited to sustaining such a large, complex, non-hibernating animal.
The common defense you hear is, well, black bears are big, and they thrive. Why couldn't Bigfoot be some kind of highly efficient omnivore like a giant raccoon or a bear?
And that's the crucial distinction Lake highlights. The metabolic difference between bears and primates.
Okay.
Bears are biological engineering marvels when it comes to efficiency. They are, as he calls them, metabolic cheapskates.
Cheapskates, I like that.
They've evolved to handle radical seasonal changes. They gorge intensely in the fall, consuming massive quantities of calories, sometimes 20,000 a day.
And then they basically shut down for the winter.
They enter torpor or hibernation, and they stretch those resources across 4 to 6 months of minimal energy expenditure.
And primates can't do that.
Primates, particularly upright, large-brained hominids, cannot do this. They run a much higher, more consistent metabolic rate. The human brain alone, which is only about 2% of our body mass,
Consumes something like 20% of our calories.
20% of the body's oxygen and calories. If Bigfoot has the complexity of a great ape, Its brain and its complex nervous system demand a constant high-octane fuel supply.
Plus, just standing upright is more energetically expensive, right?
It is, especially when moving over rough terrain. Bigfoot couldn't just sleep through the winter. Its system is tuned completely differently than a bear's, putting it in a constant state of massive caloric deficit in a North American winter, unless it's accessing huge, reliable, and obvious food caches, which we've never found.
So if this giant, constantly hungry primate were real, we would expect to see ceaseless feeding evidence. What Lake calls crime scenes everywhere.
Yes, exactly.
What specifically are we missing that a massive omnivore should be leaving behind?
We'd expect to see forensic evidence that's consistent with primate feeding patterns, which are fundamentally different from those of bears or canines.
How so?
Well, bears crush and swallow large amounts of rough vegetation, and their scat reflects that. Primates, especially those with hands, they strip carcasses or vegetation in very specific, methodical ways.
You mentioned primate-specific tooth scoring. Can you elaborate on what that is and why it's so diagnostic?
Absolutely. So when a large predator, like a wolf or a coyote, feeds on bone, they typically leave deep puncture marks and crushing fractures because of their powerful shearing jaws.
Okay.
Bears tend to crush bone with their molars, but primates have specialized incisors and canines they use for preparation. They strip meat cleanly, they crack smaller bones, and they leave very specific clean-cut marks or scores on the discarded remains.
So if Sasquatch is a primate omnivore, we would find bone fragments with these distinct primate-specific tooth scores,
Oh.
especially when it's eating deer or other large animals.
We should find them everywhere, and yet that evidence is completely absent.
So what do we find?
We find bone fragments in the woods constantly. But when forensic experts examine them, the scoring patterns consistently match known predators in the region. Bears, coyotes, mountain lions.
We find plenty of evidence of black bears, which are smaller and less dexterous.
Exactly. If a Sasquatch-sized ape was processing meals every single day to meet its massive caloric demands, the forensic trail should be overwhelming. The ecological math just does not support a stealthy existence for a creature this large and metabolically demanding.
So if the creature is ecologically infeasible, proponents always fall back on the visual proof. Let's move from the scientific silence to the crown jewel of the lore, the high watermark of traditional evidence, the Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967.
This is the legendary clip. For decades, it was the primary pillar holding up the whole belief structure.
Shot in Bluff Creek, California, it shows what appears to be a female Sasquatch walking away from the camera.
Because it was the best evidence, its foundations are often treated as, sacrosanct by believers. But, as Lake notes, the footage is largely based on vibes and wishful thinking, made worse by a very shaky camera.
Wait, though. For years, the strongest defense of that film was the claim that the creature appeared to show muscle movement under the skin, particularly around the calf and the shoulder.
The rippling muscles, yes. The idea was that this would have been impossible to replicate in the rigid costume technology of 1967.
So didn't that suggest genuine biology?
That was the core defense, yes. But when modern video and image analysis tools were applied to the original footage, those claims just evaporated.
What did they find?
What proponents saw as nuanced muscle fibers or skin rippling turned out to be nothing more than fabric folds, motion blur that's inherent in the 16mm film, and compression artifacts.
So it's a classic case of pareidolia, seeing a pattern where there isn't one.
A perfect example. The human brain interpreting noise and imperfection as definitive, complex biological data. It's the visual equivalent of finding patterns in static or seeing a face in the clouds.
And what about the unique gait? The way Patty walks, that long stride, the hip rotation, that was also cited as something a human couldn't easily fake.
That defense has also collapsed under rigorous biomechanical analysis. Biomechanics experts have confirmed that the walk is not impossible.
So a human could do it.
A human can definitely replicate it. While it is exaggerated, which is consistent with a person trying to perform a convincing stiff-legged walk in an ill-fitting suit, it remains well within the capacity of a trained human.
And it's not very efficient, is it?
Not at all. The gait is slow, deliberate, and crucially, it lacks the complex, high-energy efficiency you'd expect from a giant, wild primate that needs to traverse miles of rough terrain every single day.
It also requires us to ignore the context of the time. The idea that a convincing suit couldn't be made in 1967 is just not true.
It's easily refuted. Absolutely. Planet of the Apes, which required highly detailed, convincing ape costumes, premiered just a year later.
Right.
Costume technology was already sophisticated, expensive, and perfectly capable of fooling a bouncing home movie camera from 80 feet away, especially in the low-light, high-contrast conditions of a forest.
When you couple the availability of sophisticated suits with the, let's say, suspicious convenience of the film's origin story, a hoax seems a lot more likely.
Significantly more probable than the existence of an undocumented hominid, yes.
And again, just like with the ecological evidence, the lack of follow-up evidence at the site itself is glaring.
It's a huge problem.
A massive animal calmly walks through an open area near humans and leaves no definitive tracks, no shed hair, no scat, nothing.
It's biologically inconsistent, and if the best visual evidence we have is so easily dissected as either a costume, a misidentification, or just film noise, it's understandable why the scientific community has moved on.
Which brings us to the broader issue of the notorious unreliability of all eyewitness accounts, which still fuel the majority of those 10,000-plus reports.
Yes. Humans are just not great witnesses.
Why are we so poor at being reliable witnesses in the wild, particularly when it comes to cryptids?
Well, as Lake points out, humans are essentially walking optical illusions in stressful, confusing, or dimly lit environments.
And the number one cause of misidentification is the black bear.
By far. Black bears are highly adaptable. They can stand on two legs for long enough to seriously alarm an observer, and their shaggy, dark form in poor lighting is easily confused with a massive hominid.
There was that study by Flo Foxon.
A fascinating study. He's a data scientist who showed a significant correlation between documented black bear populations and high numbers of reported Bigfoot sightings. His conclusion was that if Bigfoot is present, it is often just many, many bears.
I remember reading about the tragic consequences of this misidentification factor. It's not just a harmless mistake. Sometimes these encounters lead to human injury or even death.
The stakes are very real. We have several documented incidents where this belief system contributed directly to violence. In 2013, a man in Oklahoma shot his friend while they were allegedly hunting Bigfoot.
That's awful.
In 2018, a hunter in Montana shot another person, claiming he mistook them for a Bigfoot obscured by brush.
And there was that strange case in North Carolina.
Right, in 2017, where a shamanist wearing large animal furs was mistaken for Sasquatch, leading police to issue public notices warning people not to shoot the supposed creature. The brain is just primed to see what it fears or what it expects to see.
We also see the cognitive bias of pareidolia at work, which creates the whole blob squatch phenomenon.
Exactly. You take a poor quality photo or video of an ambiguous object, a tree stump, a bush, a distant animal, and the human eye, especially one that's eager to confirm a belief, will impose a hominid shape onto that noise. The brain just fills in the missing gaps with the most sensational narrative.
And finally, we can't discuss traditional evidence without acknowledging the pervasive role of hoaxes.
We have to. Even skeptics and serious cryptozoologists agree that the field is just polluted by outright fabrications.
They serve a dual purpose, right?
Yeah.
Fame for the hoaxer, and it keeps the myth alive.
Perfectly put. They generate short-term fame or money for the perpetrators, and they perpetually feed the media cycle, sustaining the myth. Think of the infamous 2008 Georgia Bigfoot in a freezer hoax.
That involved Rick Dyer and Tom Biscardi.
Yes. Dyer later admitted it was a rubber costume, but he followed that up with another claimed body in 2014, showcasing the economy of just maintaining that ambiguity.
It seems like every time the scientific burden of proof is raised, a hoax gets trotted out to muddy the waters.
It does. And even the most academic attempt to ground Bigfoot in reality, the suggestion that it's a relict population of the extinct ape Gigantopithecus blacki, it just fails scientifically.
Proponents like Rover Krantz and Jeff Verborn suggest G. blacki was massive. It could have migrated across the Bering Land Bridge and survived.
But scientifically, that theory is baseless. 0 Gigantopithecus fossils have ever been found in the Americas. And more critically, the consensus among paleontologists is that due to its immense size, the largest primate ever known, it was almost certainly quadrupedal.
So it walked on all fours. It doesn't even fit the physical description of Sasquatch.
Not at all. It just reinforces the idea that this creature is an invention of American folklore, not a surviving ancient Asian primate.
Okay, so we've established that the ecological math is impossible and the traditional visual evidence is, let's say, unreliable. That moves the ultimate burden of proof to the lab, specifically DNA.
The final frontier.
And this brings us to the biggest flashpoint in cryptogenetic history. the sensational but ultimately debunked Ketchum Project of 2012-2013.
This project was a huge event in the Bigfoot community. It was led by Melba S. Ketchum, a veterinarian who ran a private lab in Texas.
It lasted 5 years, and it ended with this truly extraordinary claim that Bigfoot was confirmed as a novel hominin hybrid species living in North America.
And the specific hybrid theory was it was unprecedented. She claimed it was a relatively recent phenomenon, arising only about 15,000 years ago as a cross between modern Homo sapiens females and an unknown primate species male.
The data she claimed to have was substantial sequencing of 20 whole mitochondrial genomes and 3 whole nuclear genomes from over 100 alleged Sasquatch samples: hair, blood, skin.
And her argument was that because the maternally inherited mitochondrial DNA, the mtDNA, was identical to modern Homo sapiens, but the nuclear DNA was a novel, unknown hominin.
The only conclusion was a hybrid species created by mating between human females and a male of an unknown primate species.
Right.
Why was this theory immediately met with such widespread scientific rejection? The claim was extraordinary, obviously, but the evolutionary timeline seems impossible.
It raises multiple insurmountable biological red flags. First, there's the issue of hybrid viability.
Meaning, if they could even produce offspring?
And if that offspring could reproduce, large primate hybrids, if they occur at all, are almost always sterile. Think of a mule, a cross between a horse and a donkey.
Okay.
For a hybrid species to thrive and maintain a population for 15,000 years, it would need to be consistently interbreeding and genetically diverse. That usually means the parents are very closely related, much closer than a hypothetical unknown giant ape and a human.
And what about the timing? 15,000 years ago is like yesterday in evolutionary terms.
It's the blink of an eye. If this hybrid event happened 15,000 years ago, that means the unknown male primate parent species must have been established in North America long before that.
But as we discussed, there is zero fossil evidence of any great ape in the Americas, extinct or otherwise.
Exactly. The theory requires an ancient, massive, non-hominin primate to have existed completely invisibly, and then, only 15 millennia ago, to have successfully interbred with humans to create a stable new species. Geneticists found the entire narrative just nonsensical from an evolutionary and archaeological perspective.
The handling of the data and the publication process was equally catastrophic for the project's credibility. This was cited as a classic example of science by press release.
Oh, it was highly unprofessional. On November 24, 2012, before a single peer-reviewed word was published, Ketchum issued a press release announcing the definitive discovery.
And publishing extraordinary claims before they have withstood the rigors of peer review is a huge no-no in the academic community.
It's universally condemned. It allows sensationalism to outweigh evidence. The historical precedent is cold fusion, where these extraordinary claims just collapsed once they were exposed to external scrutiny.
So when reputable journals inevitably rejected the paper, probably due to the lack of a type specimen, no physical evidence, the evolutionary holes.
She published it in a highly dubious source.
This is the crazy part of the story. The paper finally appeared on February 13, 2013, in the inaugural issue of a journal called De Novo, Journal of Science.
And here's the crucial detail that just destroyed its standing. De Novo was revealed to be a website that had been registered anonymously only 9 days prior.
So she basically created her own journal to publish her own paper.
Its entire first and only issue contained nothing but the Sasquatch article. It's a telltale sign of predatory publishing. It's a complete bypass of legitimate peer review.
Ketchum tried to defend her work by referencing the Galileo effect, claiming scientific bias. But the issue seemed to stem from her methodology and professional credibility.
That's right. Ketchum was a veterinarian by training. She didn't hold a PhD, and she lacked specific experience in primate or ancient genetics. Her credibility was also compromised by her association with individuals known for hoaxes, which raised serious questions about the provenance of the samples.
So ultimately, critics concluded that the most likely explanation for the human-related DNA was just contamination.
Contamination is the single biggest hurdle in this entire field. Modern human DNA is incredibly robust, and it is absolutely pervasive. It is on everything: dust particles, lab surfaces, the plasticware you use.
So when you're trying to sequence degraded, trace, or old DNA, modern human DNA just easily overwhelms it, leading to false positives.
Yes, and the problem isn't always obvious contamination from the person collecting the sample or the lab worker processing it.
Right. There was that critical work by Linderholm and his colleagues on ancient DNA.
Exactly. They showed that contamination in labs can be massive and can come from surprising sources that really complicate the analysis. For instance, they showed that contamination could come from plasticware manufactured in Asia, leading to non-local human allele frequencies showing up in samples that were processed in Swedish labs.
So if the contaminant doesn't match the local population or the lab workers, it can be mistaken for a novel hominin if you're not rigorous enough.
Precisely. If the sequence is just weird human DNA, that is not enough to authenticate it. The standard is that the sequence must make phylogenetic sense. It has to fit into the known tree of life. If the sample is poorly collected or mixed, it will fail that test. In the Ketchum project, where samples were handled by non-professionals, the probability of contamination creating a misleading result was extremely high.
Thankfully, while the Ketchum drama was unfolding, a rigorous, peer-reviewed academic attempt was underway to settle the DNA question definitively. This was the Sykes-Oxford study, published in 2014.
This was the necessary corrective. It was led by Brian Sykes, a professor of human genetics at Oxford, and Michel Sartori of the Lausanne Museum of Zoology. This effort was designed specifically to overcome the contamination and credibility issues that plagued all the previous cryptozoological studies.
They solicited 57 hair shafts attributed to various anomalous primates, including Yeti and Bigfoot, to get a wide, non-biased sample set. What was their methodology, and how did they ensure it was rigorous?
They instituted extremely rigorous decontamination protocols. They effectively scrubbed the outside of the hair shafts before extracting the DNA. Then they used mitochondrial 12S ribosomal RNA sequencing.
Can you explain what 12S RNA is and why it functions as a reliable barcode for species identification? How is it different from the huge sequencing Ketchum tried to do?
Certainly. So mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, is inherited from the mother, and it's great for tracing maternal lines. The 12S ribosomal RNA gene is a very short, highly conserved section of that mtDNA found in all vertebrates.
Okay, so it's a small, stable target.
It's perfect. Because it's short and found in every cell, it's often preserved even when the rest of the DNA is highly degraded. You can think of it as a specific, highly reliable genetic barcode. By matching the sequence of this short gene, scientists can definitively identify the species genus with 100% accuracy, provided that species is already cataloged. It's a very robust method.
So after this rigorous cleaning and reliable sequencing method, what were the definitive results of the Sykes study?
The results were scientifically unambiguous and, to be honest, quite anticlimactic.
I can imagine.
Of the 57 samples, 30 yielded viable DNA. 7 failed completely, and all 30 of the viable samples matched known extant mammals with 100% sequence identity.
And the cleaning protocol worked.
It was proven effective. Only one sample from Texas yielded human DNA, and that was identified as Homo sapiens of likely European descent.
And what were the alleged Bigfoot samples from the U.S. actually identified as?
It was a barnyard and a forest floor of common animals. Bigfoot samples from Arizona, California, Minnesota, Oregon, Texas, and Washington were definitively identified as black bear, horse, cow, raccoon, sheep, white-tailed or mule deer, North American porcupine, and various canines, so a dog, wolf, or coyote.
Wow. That is the critical takeaway that completely supports Lake's conclusion regarding the unmet burden of proof.
Absolutely. The implication is just undeniable. If Bigfoot were a real species, a clean hair strand one that withstood rigorous decontamination would have eventually yielded verifiable primate mitochondrial DNA. Instead, every single credible, academically rigorous lab test results in common domestic or wild animals.
It effectively shatters the cryptid enthusiast's position that these samples are just undocumented primates.
It does, and Lake's analysis is sharp here. Unknown in a scientific context usually means degraded, mixed, or contaminated. Cryptozoologists often intentionally translate this ambiguity into undocumented primate because it sounds much more compelling than "we messed up the sample."
And the Sykes study showed the old evidence was just mundane biological material.
Leaving us with folklore, not verifiable scientific data, the general scientific consensus remains absolutely clear. The evidence is not credible, and the existence of a large, non-human primate population in North America is exceedingly unlikely. It's contradicted by both ecological science and modern DNA forensics.
This deep dive into Lake's critique leaves us with two pretty immovable conclusions. The creature is ecologically infeasible given its massive caloric demands and the constraints of the North American environment.
And every piece of physical evidence, from the shaky film to the DNA samples, collapses under modern scientific scrutiny. The scientific reality just confirms the absence of evidence.
The lack of fossil remains, reliable physical traces, or verified non-contaminated DNA compels us to conclude that we're dealing with folklore, hoaxes, and wishful thinking.
Not an uncatalogued species.
But the hunt continues, and we have to acknowledge the powerful emotional and economic factors that keep this belief alive, even without proof. What sustains this vibrant subculture, this whole world of squatching, despite the overwhelming scientific evidence against it?
The subculture belief is sustained by a very strong social and economic ecosystem. Lake identifies some key psychological drivers. First is the sunk cost fallacy.
Right, people who have spent years, thousands of dollars on gear and a lot of emotional energy, they don't want to admit it was for nothing.
Admitting defeat feels like admitting wasted time and money, so they cling to the possibility that they are on the cusp of discovery.
The community aspect must also be incredibly powerful.
It's vital. These hunting groups and online forums often morph into close-knit social circles. Bigfoot becomes the shared passion that drives connection and belonging. For many, the social benefits of that community outweigh the need for scientific validation.
The experience of belonging becomes the true purpose, regardless of the outcome of the search.
Precisely. And finally, we cannot ignore the economy of ambiguity. There is significant profit generated by the search itself.
Certainty kills revenue.
Absolutely. As long as Bigfoot remains a maybe, there's a thriving economy. This includes the sale of specialized hunting gear, night vision cameras, sophisticated audio recorders, GPS trackers, the cost of which easily runs into the thousands.
There are paid conferences, expos, guided Bigfoot expeditions.
The whole ecosystem is sustained by the perpetual ambiguity of the legend. Every blurry photo or misidentified sound fuels the cycle, guaranteeing that the next convention will be full and the next book will sell.
The legend is self-fueling. It perpetually absorbs doubt and failure back into its own narrative of an elusive genius creature.
Right. But Lake's core analytical challenge, based on ecological and genetic reality, stands firm. At some point, you have to stop waiting for the smoking gun and recognize you've spent half a century looking for a creature that seems pathologically allergic to existing in the physical world.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought, looking forward. Considering the incredible advancements we've seen in detection technology, particularly in environmental DNA, or eDNA.
A complete game changer. This tech can now identify species from trace samples, a scoop of dirt, a cup of water. We even have inexpensive open source samplers now, like the SA, the Subsurface Automated Environmental DNA Sampler.
So these devices can just sit out in the wilderness filtering water or soil over time.
And collecting and preserving any eDNA that passes through.
So if eDNA can now detect elusive aquatic invasive species or identify mammals just by testing a muddy footprint, how much longer can a large 600 to 900-pound primate, an animal that sheds hair, walks through streams, and defecates, how much longer can it remain completely invisible to this increasingly advanced, non-invasive scientific scrutiny?
That's the question. The next generation of cheap, ubiquitous sampling tools may soon provide the ultimate definitive answer to the unmet burden of proof.
So Bigfoot is real.
The woods truly cannot stay boring for much longer, and that conclusive failure to detect a creature this large will cement the scientific case against its existence permanently.